Welcome back to the Pain Free for Life podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and today I'm talking with Dr. Deborah Fryer. Deborah is a money mindset mentor, spiritual business coach, and creator of the Anatomy of Money system for holistic wealth and well-being. She helps heart-centered entrepreneurs break through subconscious mental, emotional, and financial blocks and create soul-aligned 6- or 7-figure businesses with ease, speed, and confidence. Deborah holds a PhD in comparative literature from Princeton, and she is an award-winning filmmaker who's created content for PBS, Nova, Frontline, the National Science Foundation, and other media channels. She's completed a post-bachelorate pre-medical degree and has been teaching and practicing yoga and meditation for over 30 years. Deborah's unique transformational model interweaves ancient wisdom, modern science, narrative medicine, proven mind-body practices, and creative visualization. Through speaking engagements, group and private coaching, courses, programs, and international retreats, Deborah has helped thousands of business owners around the world transform their relationship to money, power, and wealth, and to rewrite their minds and bodies for consistent ease, abundance, freedom, and flow. In this episode, Deborah and I discuss the use of the mind to heal chronic pain. We talk about the relationship between mind and body and the different areas that pain shows up in our lives, including our relationships and even our bank accounts.
Welcome back to Pain Free for Life, where we share how to successfully overcome all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And now, here's your host, co-founder, and board-certified holistic healthcare practitioner, Dr. Rob Vanbergen.
Hello, Deborah. Thanks for joining us today.
Such a pleasure to be here.
So this is a topic that, and we were talking about it right before we just started recording here, this is a topic that can concern people and that they often try to push it away and leave it like aside. And when we see patients, sometimes the first thing they'll say to us is, they know there's an emotional or a mind-based component to this, but they don't want to deal with it. They don't want to touch it right now. And I've had people say, look, I'm not going to do this if I can't get some relief or some juncture without involving my mind, without involving emotions. But this is a big part of how we heal, and it is a big part of our physical body. So how can a person use their mind to heal chronic pain?
This is such a powerful and important question. And it's a very personal question for me also, because several years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with bone-on-bone arthritis. And I was told by my internist, you should just get a hip replacement. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so I have been using my mind. I have been using mindfulness. I've been using various types of meditation. Happy to dive into what all those are. I've also been using a modality of healing called muscle activation therapy, which is like turning on one neuron at a time. And there are ways that our body experiences pain in the physical realm, and we think in images and words. And so the images and words may create a secondary emotional level of pain. They may create a narrative around pain, and you can rewrite the narrative around pain. You can create conditions in your body where you no longer experience the pain as a threat, but you realize it's safe for me to move in this way without having the experience of what you previously called pain or danger or like, I better not move off the couch or whatever the thing is. So if it would serve your audience, I would be glad to share some of the ways that I personally have used and that I use with my clients to interrupt a pain pathway. And it might be a physical pain pathway that's showing up as, I've run 10 marathons and I've put my leg behind my head as an Ashtanga yoga teacher many, 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 many times. And so being hyper flexible and being a super high achiever. And also, that kind of type A personality that runs marathons that predisposes one to overdo things. And, I just know that's my personality type. I love to move. I love to be excellent. I love to excel. And so you get physical injuries. The parts wear out. There's also an emotional level. There's also a mental level. There's also a way that our subconscious holds memories of ways that we've been injured in the past. And so many people who experience pain in their bodies, let's say they have gut issues. There's well-known research about the gut-brain axis, but every time they think about a certain thing, they start to get nauseous, indigestion, or they start to get irritable bowel syndrome.
Yeah, and I think you kind of hit it on the head there with this idea of the subconscious holding these memories of pain, because we see this a lot with people. And scar tissue specifically, when we're working on someone that has these scars, activating them with any kind of energy medicine seems to bring back the trauma of that injury, of that pain. And it's interesting to see people try and process the way through that and to be able to, as you said, kind of guide them to rewrite the narrative. Because our brain has so much power, right? Our mind, our body, and it's untapped a lot of the time. And we're constantly chasing this idea of a body that has the ultimate capacity to heal us, but a mind that blocks that healing happening. And many people that are in the position that you were in, where they go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you have bone-on-bone arthritis, you have to have surgery. They immediately, in their mind, have said, well, then I'm done. I've got to do this surgery. That is the only thing. And that can change their path, right? You went down a different path and it worked, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well enough, I don't know that surgery is not in my future, but what I do know is that I have lived, for the last 7-8 years, a very high quality of life. Yesterday, I swam 2.5 miles, and then I went for a hike. And, this is like every single day I'm swimming 2,000, 3,000 yards. Every day I'm walking 3-4 miles. And so far, I've been able to kick the can down the road. Will this be something that is possible for me forever? I don't know that. I'm still in the exploration of it. And I'm very much in the middle of, watching my mind sit down with the pain and be really compassionate and loving with the pain, not bypassing the pain, not avoiding the pain, not saying you don't exist, not saying you're wrong, go away, I don't want to deal with you. I'm actually really compassionate and really present with it. So there is a moment in each day where I am experiencing some version of pain. That said, because I'm aware of the levels of physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, intellectual pain, financial pain, spiritual pain, all of them, even if I'm having a little bit of what I might call physical pain, all the rest of me is emotionally not in pain. I'm spiritually not in pain. I'm financially not in pain. In my relationships, I'm not in pain. So the bulk of me is not in pain. And I think it's really important to make a distinction between your experience and your identity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, I would agree with you that for sure. So in your experience, what has been the relationship between mind and body? Because I always find it interesting that people sort of talk about the mind and the brain even being two separate pieces, right? So what's been your experience between those relationships?
So my initial experience that I'm aware of was feeling not safe being in a body. So I definitely separated mind and body. And I chose to not live in a body. I chose to, be very creative, to live in my imagination. I didn't really know how to do this material body thing. I didn't know how to live in a body. I didn't know how to deal with money. I didn't know how to be in relationship. Like this whole physical material thing was really confusing and unsafe. And I didn't know how to do it. I was super awkward and clunky. And it was very easy for me to be creative, to paint, to fantasize, to meditate, to, do the spiritual woo things that many people like to do. And I separated those two, and I didn't think that they could coexist. And what I now understand is that they can't not coexist, that everything is spirit, including the body parts of you, which are just more compressed parts of spirit, but everything is energy. So we could be in an expanded state of energy and a compressed state of energy. In your body, you're all states of energy at once. You're solid, that's the bone and the cardiovascular system. You're fluid, which is the lymph and the blood and the saliva, and tears. Your gas, which is mostly in your digestive system, as well as, the oxygen and CO2 and ways that you're exchanging constantly gases with the environment. And your crystals. Most people are familiar with crystals in the pineal gland, but the actual structure, the lattice of all of our cells is crystalline. So we're actually existing in all the states at once. But I didn't know that when you asked me what was my initial understanding. My initial understanding was the spiritual part is over here and the physical part is over here. And somehow you guys got to get it together because you don't know how to live in a body. So I thought, well, this is true. Like I didn't know how to do a body. And sometime in my 40s, this repetitive drum of I should have been a real doctor. I have a PhD from a fancy Ivy League school, but I didn't value it. And I thought I should have been a real doctor. Then I'd have real respect. I'd have a real paycheck. I'd be a real person. And I didn't know at the time how eager I was to invalidate myself. So I went down the path to go to medical school. And on that path, I ended up working in an anatomy lab for a number of years. And that was transformative in every way, because inside of all of our organs is empty space. And this blew my mind in the best possible way. Realizing that the heart is constantly doing this, and that the heart is always, exchanging with the environment. It's always having new breath at each moment. It's always letting go of what's toxic, CO2, metabolic waste, lactic acid. There's this constant exchange. There's this constant expand, contract, and fill and empty. And these pressure differentials are actually keeping us alive. They are necessary for our livelihood and for our life, for us to be in a body. And so this really changed my relationship with pain, because I had been so used to compartmentalizing, this is good, this is bad. And, seeing the heart do this and seeing the kidneys do this and see the lungs do this. And, seeing my hair fall out and new hair grows in. And, like everything in the body is in this constant creative cycle, which means I must be too. And that means that pain must be too, that it's a temporary thing that rises and falls. And it's actually there to protect me. It's there because it loves me. It's there because it's trying to get my attention. And if I hadn't been avoiding myself for so long, I might have been able to perceive that my body was in pain a little sooner. It might not have taken 10 marathons before my knees said, hey, we're done. Had I been a little bit more sensitive to what it meant to actually live in a body. So that was my experience where, they're very separate. My experience now is that there is, how can I say this? I was going to say there is no separation, but I want to say this in a little bit different way, that mind and body are both contributing to the whole. I think that I see the body as like this museum warehouse where all the artifacts of the past are, where all the dinosaur bones are of the past, where all of our past experiences and wounds and pains and celebrations and successes, all of that gets coded in our nervous system. And the body is the repository of that nervous system awareness that mostly operates below the level of our conscious awareness, what we call the subconscious. And above, what we call mind and, the relationship between mind and brain, let's put that aside and I'll go back to that in a second. But what we call mind, the part of ourselves that thinks it's in charge is really operating in the past. And it's operating from, this is what I know to be true. I think this is going to hurt because it hurt in the past. I think I'm going to get rejected because I got rejected in the past. So the mind, in a way, is stuff that we are aware of having learned, of having experienced. And your conscious mind, is is so wanting to protect you. It's so looking out for you. It so wants the best for you. And the subconscious, where a lot of our nervous system stuff is hanging out, is also loving us and wanting to protect us. And the subconscious, scientists say it accounts for 95, 96% of us. So let's bring all of that into the room so that instead of operating from the 4 or 5% that we're aware of, which is great, we want to keep our brilliant, analytical, planning, rational, logical minds. We want to keep that part. But then there's this 95, 96% of the rest of you that's mysterious and it's magical and it's connected to the all that is. And we want all of that to be available to us so that we are fully resourced. And I think this is why people get burned out, why they get exhausted, why we develop pain patterns in the body, because it's a pain pattern that started as an energetic pattern that we didn't pay attention to. And the conscious mind is so like, no, I got this. I mean, I was like this. And I'm still a little bit like this. Like, I got this. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to be that one person who doesn't have to have a hip replacement. And, I'll probably end up having a hip replacement at some point because I'm young. I don't know how long I can not have that be. So right now the work is, I'm fine. I'm fine if I do, and I'm fine if I don't. And so far I haven't done it yet. Right. But there's this constant relationship between which one's in charge. And the mind is actually not the one that's in charge. The conscious mind is not the one that's in charge. It thinks it's in charge. It wants to be in charge. And it gets really aggressive and attached and clingy and loud when it's not in charge.
It's interesting because
work is in the subconscious.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because you can feel that kind of pressure of the subconscious creeping up on you. Because even if you think about stress and you think about how you're trying to manage stress, and even if your stress management is to push your stressful situation out of your mind, to distract yourself, it's gnawing at the back, right? And it's still trying to come back in. And as soon as that distraction drops you're suddenly stressed again. So you're right. So much of that and so much of our body's functions, right? I mean, people need to think about that. So much of everything we do, we don't have to think to breathe. We don't have, well, sometimes I feel like maybe we're like, oh, we haven't breathed in a while, but we don't have to think to breathe. We don't have to think to digest. These things, all these trillions of cells in our body are doing stuff all the time and we don't know. So it's interesting to try and bring those together and create that connection between them and understand almost that you don't have full control. So you almost just have to let it go a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have full control at all.
No.
It's been a really fun and interesting experiment. I feel the different energy systems in the body, in different places in the body. And the way this came in was I was leading a meditation class at 4 a.m. in a local yoga studio. And it was called Seva, which is where you serve for free and know you to do that, which is very common in spiritual communities. So I was at this yoga center. I got there at 4 a.m. and it's pitch dark and it's freezing cold. It's the middle of winter in Colorado. And I really didn't want to be there, but I said I would do it. So I honored my commitment. And the yoga studio happened to be right next to a bar where they have axe throwing and there are a lot of pickup trucks. And I'm like, oh my God, like I don't want all these drunk people to come into the yoga studio and the door is supposed to be open because it's a free meditation for the public. So like I just walked in with all of this angst and this irritation and this resentment. And I sat myself down on the meditation cushion and, I did what I was supposed to do. And I started meditating. And I was feeling all this angst and this fear and I was catastrophizing. I was watching my mind walk out the door and go to the bar and imagine that some, drunk person was going to come into the yoga studio and I was all by myself. And, so I was like catastrophizing. I was imagining a worst case scenario. And I was, sitting in this chemical bath of fear, completely induced by me because there was nobody there but me. And the people in the bar were doing the bar. And I was in the meditation studio doing meditation. Like there was no problem. But in my mind, I had generated this enormous problem. And then all of a sudden, I had this experience as though there was this chimney over my head and Santa Claus had dropped this enormous bulging bag of toys straight down the chimney. And it just like landed with a thump in the bowl of my pelvis. And I could see that I was a torque field. I could see that my entire system was this channel of energy that was circulating. And then, because I had spent so much time in the anatomy lab, I suppose, this is what my mind was processing in the meditation, but I could see how my heart was giving and receiving, expanding and contracting, exchanging old deoxygenated blood for new blood that would be oxygenated. I could just see this whole thing. And then I saw that my lungs were also doing this. They were bringing in new oxygen and taking away the old. And I could see that there was this energetic movement through my kidneys, and I could see the kidney tubules that look like trombones. I could see that happening. And I could see the adrenals and how they're like rubies on the inside of the kidneys when I cut open the kidneys and the adrenals are on top of them. And like I could just see everything moving through. And I just had this like amazed awareness of I'm in the middle of all of this. Every single organ in me is a torque field. All my cells are torque fields. There's this exchange happening. And how can I not be in the middle of it? How can I be separate from any of it? And while I'm sitting here having this fully illumination, and I could see the organs in my body lighting up in different colors, and I could see them all exchanging in a kind of cartoony way, in a colorful way. And I wanted to write it down. And I heard this voice saying, don't move. You're in meditation. You're not supposed to move. And I was like, but I have to write it down. Don't move. But I have to write it down. Don't move. And I was like, screw it. I'm going to write it down. So I opened my eyes. I drew pictures of it in my journal. And, that became what I now teach, which is called the anatomy of money, which is really not about money at all. It's about how do we have the freedom from pain, whether it's financial pain or spiritual pain or physical pain, right? The pain, the feeling that we're separate from everything.
Wow. Yeah. So this is actually going to lead into the next question, which is, and I know this is for a lot of people when they think about money, it can be connected, but how does pain show up in all these different spaces? Because you said, you're talking about relationships, you're talking about the bank accounts, the legal stresses of just living in this world. Like, how does it manifest in all of these ways?
So think about, let's say right now you're thinking about your bank account, or think about how much income you've made so far this year. And just see the number in your head, say the number in your mind, recognize, yep, this is where I am in my business. This is how much money I've made. And notice, is your body in dialogue with the thought? Do you notice a sensation anywhere in your body? And for many, many people, the minute they think about money, they begin to feel a bit of shortness of breath. They begin to feel a bit of constriction somewhere in the stomach area. Sometimes it's full-on nausea where people feel like they're going to throw up. Sometimes they hear a voice in their head that says, I should have made more. I've been slacking off, right? They've got all this judgment that immediately shows up. And then when you listen to the judgment of you should be doing better, you're so far behind, or you shouldn't have taken the summer off, or you can't make that much money. Like there are people who are having a really hard time. Who are you to make all that money? Whatever the commentary is matters not. What's important is that you have running commentary going on that's coming from your subconscious about you and your relationship with money, your value, your power, how deserving you are. And your relationship with that narrative has a cascade of chemicals associated with it, right? If you're judging you, if you're criticizing you, you're probably feeling a little bit of adrenaline right now. You're probably feeling a little bit of angst right now. And how do you know? Because you're feeling constriction in your stomach. The digestive system is one of the first parts that goes offline when we're in fight or flight. You're probably feeling some tension around your lungs, right? You might be feeling a lot of energy in your hands and your feet because you want to fight. So that's one example. Money stuff often shows up around the solar plexus, around the stomach, around the ability to receive and to metabolize, to have some, to take some for you, and also to let it go, right? To invest in whatever you want to invest in, a second home, or, send money to causes you care about, or to buy yourself new clothes or a new car, right? You want to move on the money through. Money wants to circulate in the same way that breath does, and that water does, and that earth does. So it often shows up there. Let's say you have a tendency to be a people pleaser. So if you have a tendency to be a people pleaser, you might have a tendency to suck it up. You might have a tendency to, I better not say that. I don't want to hurt their feelings, right? And I'm kind of like, you can see, like I'm kind of gesturing here because it's going to show up here in the throat. You might start coughing. When I do exercises like this with my clients, they'll start coughing. Some that have a full-on asthma attack because this begins to constrict. Not safe for me to express myself. So those are some examples.
Yeah.
You might feel it as I'm beginning to get a tension headache. I have all this buzzing, all this tension right here. I have it right here on my temples. I just got really tight in the base of the occiput. That shows that you're very mental. You've probably been somebody who's not had a lot of support, and your operating way of coping in the world is, I'm just going to figure it out. I'm smart. I'll figure it out. I'll do it myself. And so you're just like walking around being super smart and super high achieving, but you're actually not fully grounded in your body.
I think it's interesting how you frame that as well. Like, people think of money issues and they often think about not having money. And some people are like, well, I don't have money issues. But as you said, it can be the issue of what do you do with it? Where do you put it? Do you deserve it? Do you deserve everything you've got? Or what's going to happen? Like, some people I think spend so much time with the stresses of their lives, and like they worry that, especially those in chronic pain, that they're going to lose their job or not be able to work as much. And so the life they've built for themselves hinges on them pushing their body beyond what it is capable of.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one. That's really hard to deal with because you're dealing with this physical sensation, right? Of stop. But your mind is saying, I can't stop. And this is where people, as you said, they burn out. And that burning out can be like, I'll say I've burnt out a few times over the last few years, because when we started Pain Free for Life, we pushed and pushed and pushed. And I did nothing but work 7 days a week, doing my PhD at the time too. And I had a couple of crash moments where I definitely completely crashed. And I have had to learn so hard. You never think that you have to learn to look after yourself because you think, well, I've got to do better. I got to do more. And to be able to actually look at yourself and say, I have to look after me, because if I'm not okay, I can't do all of this work I want to do. I can't help other people. I mean, that in and of itself is a whole new reflection and attempting to understand how your body functions and why it functions. And I'm sure everyone has their own unique stresses, their own unique anxieties, their own unique way of running their mind and their body and pushing through. And, everyone just needs to figure out what that is and then figure out some techniques to manage it, I guess. What else can we do?
Yeah. I totally agree. I had this experience in 2013. So it was 11 years ago. I was in the anatomy lab, and my dad dropped out of a massive coronary. And the next day, it was my job to go into the anatomy lab. And we happened to be on the cardiovascular system in October. And it was my job to take the heart out of the body of the cadaver. And I remember writing to my boss and saying, I don't think I can come in. And she said, that's fine. Take all the time you need. And I sat down on my meditation cushion and I realized I can't not see what killed my father. I have to go do this. And so I went into the anatomy lab that day and I took the heart out of the cadaver of a man who was about the age of my father. And they don't tell us how old the cadaver is. So this is my guess of what the man's age was. But I could see, holding his heart in my hands, that he too had died of a massive coronary. Because when the heart is functioning optimally, the atria fill and then they empty, and they fill and they empty, and they fill and they empty. And they do this in a coordinated fashion. And when there's massive coronary, they're like going like this. They're like all uncoordinated and they're going at different speeds and it's very chaotic. And you could see that in this man's heart, where one side was completely caved in and one was completely full. And it was like my entire understanding of how are we living in a body completely changed. And I realized I had been running my business only giving. I had not been allowing myself to receive. I'd been pulling all-nighters frequently. I had been doing a lot of pro bono work and not charging for it because I didn't know at the time, but I will say now, I didn't feel deserving of receiving the money. So I knew I was excellent at what I was doing, but I didn't feel deserving of receiving. So I just said, oh, that's fine. I'll just do this for free. And I wasn't letting myself exercise. I wasn't letting myself sleep. I wasn't letting myself eat meals at regular intervals. I wasn't having social time. And it was so clear to me that I was going to be the next cadaver on the table, who had a massive coronary. If I didn't do something to stop following in the path of my dad, which was work really, really, really hard. You can sleep when you're dead, work 7 days a week, work 24 hours a day, don't have any time with your kids, don't eat healthy food, et cetera, et cetera. And, it was a real a mind opener. It was a real heart opener. It was devastating.
Yeah.
And I remember walking out of the anatomy lab that day and looking at the trees. It was October and the aspens were starting to change colors. And I could see how the aspens were just beautifully changing color and then dropping the leaves without a lot of drama. And I had this almost prayer, this request to the trees saying, how do you do this? How do you transform without so much drama? Like, how do you just drop? Like, you don't want to do anymore. And they said, watch us, we'll teach you. And so I gave myself 6 months to really do the deep inner work. And one of the first messages I got was nature is not producing 24/7. And why on earth did I think that I was supposed to be productive 24/7? That is counter to the laws of nature. It is counter to the laws of biology. It is counter to the laws of physics. It is counter to everything that allows us to be in a body, which is constantly exchanging. And so I made it my business to learn how to receive, how to rest.
That's beautiful. And I think it's something I've done too. And in traditional medicine, a traditional Chinese medicine kind of perspective, they look at the seasons and trying to bring more of that into my life and thinking, there is a time for rest. And it doesn't have to be, you don't just take the winter off or something like that. You got to consider your days, these seasons, and take the time. Don't stay up until, as you said, all night just to get this thing done. Don't take nothing back for yourself. You have to be able and willing to give if you want to get better, if you want to have some control over your subconscious mind almost, because that subconscious mind is like a background program, right? It's constantly running and it has wants and desires and needs. And I think we don't give it enough most of the time. We just push forward and we push our bodies to that point. And to that point, like I watched my dad, our listeners will know Dr. Hashay, he with zero intention of retiring. He's still alive. I convinced him to retire last year at 78 years old. And I'm able to now see a future in which, maybe one day I could retire too. Because I was watching him just go and being like, that's what I need to do too. That's what I need to do to succeed, to help as many people as I can. And it's unrealistic to look at that and say that is the way you're just going to go, because like we deserve rest throughout our lives too, right? We need that. We don't want to just get to the end, as you say, and then some random event takes you out. Because I assume it sounds like it was very unexpected for your dad.
Yes and no. He had a history of working all the time.
Okay.
And his diet wasn't the best.
Right.
Exercise wasn't the best. So he had cardiovascular issues that he'd been living with for many, many years, actually. He had a quadruple bypass, 15 years before. And he'd been living with the ramifications of that. There were some, I would say, unresolved emotional issues. So, there were just things that had hardened in him that eventually hardened in his body. So it wasn't totally unexpected that he would have a cardiovascular event. At the moment that it happened, I would say that it was unexpected. I actually got information before it happened, which is that I was teaching a yoga class and I had my phone off and everybody was in Shavasana. And I said to the students, can you feel where you end, where your physical body ends and the infinite begins? Can you feel that place in your being? And at that moment, I got a text on my phone and my phone was off. It was on airplane mode. Like I shouldn't have gotten any information, but somehow there was a text and I could see that it was from my stepmother. And all she said was, call me.
Hmm.
And I knew that was the moment that my dad had dropped his body. And in fact, it was. And
Wow.
my dad continues to what I call Radio Shack me, which is that he does things in the non-physical that are visible to everybody. He'll mess with electronics.
Hmm.
This has happened quite a lot in very public spaces. When he first died and I was still working in the anatomy lab, I'd go into the anatomy lab and I would, let's say, plug in a bone saw. And my bone saw wouldn't turn on. Everybody else's bone saws worked fine. I would try all the plugs. None of them would work. Other people would take the same bone saw, plug it in, it would work. So it would be like that. And everybody in the room would be like, that's really weird. Or, I'd go to get a massage and the massage therapist would put a CD in her CD player. And this is in the olden days, I guess, 2013. That was before we had Spotify. And it wouldn't play. And I would say, oh, it's just my dad. And then, I'd get up off the table and I'd leave, and then it would start to play. There were lots and lots of things. I was teaching yoga at Google at the time. And I remember I was plugged into the Google sound system and there was music in the room. And I started talking about my dad and the sound cut out. It just went dead. So, there are lots of ways. I think there are things in the non-physical that we don't understand. The conscious mind doesn't like that. The conscious mind doesn't like to not understand everything. And everything is energy. And energy is acting on energy. And, from a perspective of Chinese medicine, it moves through the elements and it moves in different vibrational patterns. And to the degree that we can open to the allowance of that being an option, I think can really impact and influence our healing in a beautiful way.
Perfect. So I'm going to ask you one more question. We're kind of over time a little bit here, but just for people listening, I was trying to give active solutions to things that people can do. Like if you could make just one suggestion, small, big, whatever it may be, for people listening that they may be able to start to try and employ to try and control their mind, improve their pain, what would that be? What would be your kind of number one?
Meditation. And the specific way that I love to practice, especially when I'm feeling pain. It doesn't matter if it's physical pain or emotional pain or financial pain, or feeling rejection. I mean, financial pain can feel like rejection, or it could feel like, oh, I just lost a lot of money in the stock market today. Or it can feel like, oh, that client didn't renew. Or it could feel like, oh, I made an investment and I shouldn't have made that investment. Like whatever it is, whatever the form it is, doesn't matter, because there's the situation and then there's our reaction to the situation. So the way that I love to practice this is I'll get comfortable, I'll close my eyes, and then I'll take a seat in the theater of my mind. And I'll imagine that I'm sitting some distance from the stage or some distance from the screen of the mind. However you see it, whether you're seeing a movie or you're seeing things happen on stage, but I'll be observing it. And I'm just going to start with, let's say, the commentary, the mental commentary, which might be a monologue, it might be a dialogue, it might be an argument, it might be if I should have done this, I should have done that. I'm just going to watch. Anytime I hear any of that, I'll just say here. And if I'm not hearing myself comment or dialogue or argue or rehash the situation or wish it were different or say I'm going to get fired or say, oh my God, I'm in so much pain or whatever, there's some kind of, narrative running underneath the radar. I'm aware of it. I'm going to say here. If I'm not hearing anything, I'm going to say rest. And I'm going to notice, I'm having a moment of my mental activity resting, which it does between thoughts. And if all we notice is the thought, we think we get caught up in the thought. But if we notice the space between the thought where there's no mental activity, I'm just going to say rest. And I'll do that for, a couple of minutes, and then I'll move on and I'll notice when I'm thinking about the pain or the situation or a person or something in the past or the future, and I'll notice, is there any visual activity? Do I see the part of my body that's in pain? Or do I see a person that I'm angry with? Or do I see, a scene of a beach? Or do I see a scene of war? Whatever comes up is perfectly fine. It's whatever, wants to arise. Whatever I'm noticing, I'll say, see. I'm just acknowledging I'm seeing something. I'm not getting into judging or analyzing what I'm seeing. I'm simply acknowledging see. And if my visual screen is blank, I'll say rest. And I'll notice that the pain might be there, but there's no visual activity at the moment. So I'll acknowledge rest. And then I'll do that for a couple of minutes, and then I'll move on to feeling. And feeling is usually the hardest one for people. Usually voice narrative is the easiest one. And sensation is a little bit easier, although sensation very often tips into judgment, like I'm feeling mad or that person is a jerk. That's actually hearing, right? That's not feeling. Feeling is my stomach's in a knot, or feeling is I feel like I'm going to throw up, or feeling is I'm cold, I'm hot, I feel pressure. Those kinds of things are feeling. So feeling is the last one. And I'll just notice I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling warmth, I'll say feel. If I'm feeling comfort, I'll say feel. If I'm feeling the softness of the sheepskin on my bare feet, I'll say feel. If I'm not feeling anything, because my mind is really busy writing stories, right now I'm over here in hearing, so I'm not feeling anything. So I'll say rest. And this way of giving the mind something to do, the mind likes to label and it likes to compartmentalize. So I'm actually giving my mind something to do in a very simple, high-level way. Am I hearing? Am I seeing? Am I feeling? And if I'm not, I'm at rest. And this can create a distance from, a separation from, an acceptance of the thing that I'm experiencing, because there might be pain, but there's also pleasure. There might be pain, but there might also be rest at the same time. So I offer that as a way of being present with noticing the patterns that are specific to you. There's no right or wrong. It's simply what are the ways that you predominantly learn to relate to that experience that you call pain.
Wow, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Deborah. Thanks for coming on the show. I'm glad we got to do this finally. So to everyone that's listening, I have included all of Deborah's information in the show notes at painfreeforlife.com/podcast. So feel free to connect with her, check out what she does. Until next time, I'm Dr. Rob Vanbergen, and you're listening to Pain Free for Life.
Thanks for listening to Pain Free for Life. Be sure to follow us, share the show with family and friends, and leave us a review on iTunes. Every time you share the show, you are helping someone take their life back from pain. Visit painfreeforlife.com for more resources, including our free guides to microcurrent, the Hache protocol and inflammation, as well as our blog and online community full of people just like you, successfully overcoming all kinds of chronic and extreme conditions to live happy, productive, pain-free lives forever. And stay tuned for the next episode of Pain Free for Life.